What is up, guys? Bible in a Year, episode 79. We're walking through 1 Samuel 1 through 5. And as we go through 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, we have the good doctor, Dr. Jim Halbert, in the house, who tells me, don't call me doctor.
That's right.
Because he said, I'm the kind of doctor that can't do you any good. I beg to differ on that, guys. Here we go, 1 Samuel. All right, 1 Samuel 1 through 5. Hello there.
How are you?
Jim.
It's good to be here.
Man, I'm glad you're here. Boise, Idaho.
Yeah, flew in yesterday all day
and
long.
boy, are my arms tired.
Yeah, boy, I tell you what. Yeah, dun-dun-dun. Yeah. Where's a rim shot when you need it? Yeah.
So it's funny. We're going to talk about 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel with Jim. And guys, honestly, I'm going to be more of an interviewer here than I am some sort of, I don't think I'm a Bible expert or a theologian. I think I've read it quite a few times and I know the book pretty well, but I have been fascinated, and we were talking about this off camera before we started. I have been fascinated with your perspective on these two books since, and I don't even remember the setting where I heard it the first time. And I don't even remember how many years ago it was. Like when, okay, so again, we'll talk doctorate like this long. How long ago did you get your doctorate?
2006 is when I completed it, but my dissertation was on the story from 1 Samuel.
Okay, just kind of 30-second explanation here. What was the dissertation,
Essentially, as a pastor, now of 42 years, I discovered something that's already in the Bible. I didn't invent this. This is not my idea. But in the caves of Adullam, 1 Samuel 22, we have three things that happened. First of all, David found refuge in God, and he provided refuge to God's people, and we'll get into that when we get there. But they were a broken people. Mm-hmm. But what happened in that cave literally transformed them, because they came in as sort of a motley crew, and they leave David's mighty men, the greatest fighting force Israel's ever known. So I began to see that, and then when they left the cave, they were there to proclaim there's a new king in town, so to speak. And I saw the three elements of refuge, transformation, and partnership. I thought, wow, what a metaphor for what the church needs to be. And that's the essence of what I did.
And I don't remember where I heard you speak about that for the first time, but here I am. This is, almost 20 years ago for me, whenever I heard you speak about this, and we didn't even know each other at that time. And Jim's the pastor at that time. He was the pastor of, Crossroads out in Boise, which was the largest church in the Evangelical Methodist Church. And here I am, this early 30-something-year-old pastor, mid 30-something-year-old pastor. And I hear this guy speak, and I was like, oh, my gosh, I got to get a hold of that. I don't even know if you remember this, but I said, would you email me your dissertation? And you were like, what? Who wants to read my doctoral dissertation? And I was like,
they say when you do a dissertation, put a $100 bill in it and put it on the shelf. You come back 10, 20 years later, you'll find that $100 bill because nobody reads it.
Well, I can tell you, I read your doctoral dissertation.
Okay, all right.
And, that's been 20 years ago. Yeah. But it blew my mind. And I have been thinking about this ever since. And so at the end of the year last year, when we were talking about, let's start this Bible in a Year podcast, again, and I'm not trying to puff you up or anything, but it was just like, I got to get Jim here to do 1 and 2 Samuel because I've been so enamored by, this work, for the last 15 or 20 years.
Well, two of my favorite books, and they're, again, I'm not coming off as the expert either, but I've spent a lot of time here just enjoying it.
I know you have.
And I hopefully can add some of that enjoyment to this discussion.
Well, and I think, too, for the people that are doing Bible in a Year with us, these are folks that, look, they don't have theological treatises on their bookshelves. They don't have probably endless commentaries on their bookshelves. But they love the Lord, and they love the Scripture, and they're getting to know the Scripture.
Great. Yeah.
And the practicality with which you apply these two books, I think, is going to be fantastic for people. So there's our brief 5-minute introduction to 1 Samuel 1 through 5. Okay, I'm just going to let this thing flow.
Let's do it.
Take us on a little journey here. Walk us through 1 Samuel 1 through 5. I'm going to interject where I can, but boy, this thing starts off with a bit of a knucklehead and Hannah's husband and just grows into the beauty of Samuel.
Right. Elkanah and Hannah, the parents of Samuel, it's an amazing thing. The first thing I notice about him is this is what not to say to your wife. She wants a child. She's barren, and she pours out her heart to God. In fact, it's interesting, in loss, she praises.
Yeah.
That's one of the first things I notice about Hannah. I tend to praise when things are great, not when things are not great. But it's in loss she praises. Now, Elkanah's baffled, not just Eli the high priest, but her husband's baffled. And he says this wonderful thing to her that I think every husband can learn from. He says, "Why would you want a child when you have me?" I'm like, oh, that's probably why she gave Samuel to Eli to raise, because she didn't want him raising. That's kidding. But it's an interesting phrase from him. But what I really notice is that in her loss, she praises. And that is such an important thing. And in chapter 2, verse 4, I don't want to jump ahead too quickly, but she makes one of the first statements that Mary later makes and Jesus makes. And you said it earlier. I never put those two together, but it's really a precursor to the Magnificat, which is the lowly will be raised up, or the first shall be last. In chapter 2, verse 4, she makes that acknowledgement that God will bless the lowly, and he blessed her with a child in Samuel. Yeah.
Well, and even you look at the Philistines pressing down upon them, and it never really ends. I mean, this thing goes on and on and on throughout the Old Testament. There is a liberation theology that you see present in all of this, which, I mean, it's liberation with Hannah herself. It's liberation through Samuel. It's liberation in God, ultimately through David. There is liberation theology in it. And if you look at Mary's song, it's same thing is in place as well. So anyways, so, I mean, walk back to this for me. Hannah's barren. We talked about this in the book of Judges study. Manoah's wife, Rachel, Mary, Elizabeth, Hannah. God always seems to work through what seems to be barrenness to bring out the birth of life. I've always been fascinated.
It's sort of like the wilderness, right? It reminds me of Deuteronomy chapter 8, when Moses is talking to the people about the purpose of the wilderness. It's to test you, to teach you, and to humble you. Those three things. And it still applies today in barrenness, in loss, in the wilderness of life. Those three elements are still there to humble us, to teach us, to test us. Yeah.
So good. Anything else there? And I know you said you didn't want to jump ahead. Anything else there in Hannah's prayer after she realizes, oh my gosh, God has blessed me with this child? Anything else that stands out in that prayer for you?
In the prayer itself, not so much, but in the decision to let Eli raise Samuel.
Okay,
that's huge.
So who is this Eli character?
He's a high priest. His sons are supposedly supposed to come up after him and become high priests, but they use sacred space for pagan purposes.
This is huge.
And I think that's been a temptation of everyone since, to take what is holy and use it for the flesh.
All right, so break that down for the people that are watching this. I get what you're saying. Help them understand that a little bit more, what you're talking about.
They took advantage of their power and their position to use people and to use the blessings of God for their own building up. And so Eli, though, as the high priest, did not discipline them.
Never.
And it's interesting that Hannah, in her obedience to God, gives Samuel to Eli to raise. He is not an example of a good dad.
I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here or contradict or anything. Is this a statement about Hannah's devotion and trust in God to get literally under Eli's care? She's giving her weaned child truly to the Lord. It's interesting. When we started Kingdom and we had the opportunity to buy this property, I had a retired school teacher. It wasn't like she was rolling in the money. She came to me and she said, I have $63,000. I want to give it to you so that you can buy that piece of property.
Wow.
And I said, I can't take that from you. And she looked at me and she said, I'm not giving it to you.
A little humbling there.
It is humbling.
Yes, exactly.
When I read this, though, and I get what you're saying, and again, I'm not contradicting what you're saying in any way whatsoever. I agree with you totally. Like you're going to put your baby in charge of Eli? I think that Hannah comes at it with
absolutely
that attitude.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. I mean, we don't know much about her husband except
he was
a
knucklehead.
Except for the crazy statement that he makes. She was trusting God in spite of the circumstances that she was living in.
Oh my gosh.
And of course it works out, right? I mean, look at Samuel, look at how he turns out. He looks nothing like Eli or his sons. So she was right to do so. And sometimes we have to trust God in spite of the circumstances.
And what was she going back to?
Right.
I mean, you think the whole discussion between loneliness and solitude. Here's a woman at the beginning who did trust in God, but there are I'll use the word tinges. It's not even a tinge. Right. It's this broad stroke of loneliness that you hear in Hannah's voice. When God blesses her with Samuel, she takes this thing to a place where she is completely content with the solitude of God as she turns that child over and goes back to this absolutely fractured household of hers.
Right.
I mean, who knows what the other wife said?
Well, and who knows how old she was?
Oh, yeah.
Because let's be honest, it reminds me of Elizabeth and John the Baptist. There's a strong chance that he was raised in the
Qumran region.
The Qumran community. What does that mean? Was she so old that she died? Was that a turning? Because both Samuel and John the Baptist seem to share this Nazirite vow.
They do.
Right. So there's a sense of when God answers a prayer, then I'm going to respond to God, not to my circumstances. I'm going to trust God completely with not just the answer to my prayer, but the outcome of that prayer.
So we're trying to keep all these episodes right around 15 minutes, and I'm not trying to cut anything off because we got a long way to go today in recording these broadcasts.
Right.
One that I think everybody knows, God calls Samuel. Samuel goes to Eli. Eli says, hey, I didn't say anything. God calls Samuel. Samuel goes to Eli.
Right.
Speak, Lord, your servant's listening.
Right.
Help our people understand the message in all of that for where they are in their lives today.
Well, it's interesting, the three, right? Jesus begs 3 times for the cup to be removed from him in the Garden of Eden, or Garden of Gethsemane. Paul begs 3 times for God to remove the thorn from the flesh. There was a belief that 3 times is the final answer, the 3 representing beginning, middle, and end. So it's a completion. When that happens, we have it 3 times. Eli was at least smart enough to realize on the 3rd time, you know what? Next time that happens, say this, speak, Lord. Yeah. I think sometimes it takes 3 times for God to get through to me too. The first time it's like, was that just bad pizza or was that God's voice?
Yeah.
Then I hear somebody else confirm it. Reminds me of when 2 or 3 ask anything in my name.
Oh, that was huge last night when we were in group and you said that.
So there's a sense of, I don't just trust what I'm reading for myself in the scripture. I go to people I trust and say, am I hearing this correctly?
Mm.
And so there's a sense of that 3 being significant here. That's what I have,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to kind of bring this to completion, the abuse of Hophni and Phinehas, different Phinehas from Numbers 25 fame, the abuse of their power, the abuse of their position,
Right.
and when the Philistines are bearing down upon them, they try to use the ark as a rabbit's foot.
Exactly right. It's what the theologians call sympathetic magic. If we bring the power of God with us, we can do whatever we want. The problem with that is that God refuses to be used. Even though he had the power to overcome the Philistines in that one moment, he allows his presence, or in the ark, to be captured by the Philistines. And of course, Israel is devastated. The sons are killed. Eli, when he hears the news, dies. But that same power that didn't show up for battle does show up when the Philistines capture it, and they become sick and cancerous, and they end up bringing the ark back because they can't handle the power. It's not that God's power wasn't in the ark. It's that God refuses to be used. And I can treat objects in the same way. Well, as long as I have a cross around my neck, or God's with me. God is with us because his power is present, and he promises to be with us. Period.
It's an issue of surrender, not a matter of manipulation.
Absolutely.
And the thing about it is, and I'm not trying to be convenient or silly about this in any way whatsoever, but honestly, I think Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, and they get it right in a lot of ways. You go, gosh, I was like in grade school when that movie came out. You see that in Raiders of the Lost Ark. They're trying to take that ark and use that in order to, and they get it's tiger by the tail, man. Right. I mean, it is the tiger by the tail. And again, guys, I'm not trying to be cheap by that, but this is a real, that's what they were doing. They were trying to manipulate the power of God for their own personal benefit. Right. And we do that a lot.
Yes. I was going to say pastors are can do this. We see the power, we realize the power, we believe in the power, and then we want to use that power for our own benefit. God will not be used.
I said this in a sermon a couple of weeks ago. The whole concept of, just Christian nationalism and all that. God is not to be toted out as our mascot.
No.
And when we start fooling around like that, we are walking down a dangerous road. Exactly. All right, any final thoughts before we finish this one up?
No, I just can't wait to get to the next section.
All right, guys, there you go. First round of this, 9 more to go from 1 Samuel, and then I think we have 9 in 2 Samuel.
Let's do it.
Let's do it, baby. All right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow. God bless you.